recently, in the news, Quentin Tarantino had a lot to say on the Two Bears, One Cave podcast, where he was pretty much shooting at Marvel movies. And what's your take on this, man? Do you want to give the whole background story of what happened?
Well, first of all, let's just say Quentin Tarantino's always got a lot to say. And I think the initial reporting of it, because I didn't actually watch the podcast, I saw the reporting and the fallout and the beef between him and Simu Liu, the titular Shang-Chi of the movie. So Tarantino essentially said that he doesn't think that Marvel movie actors are actual real movie stars. And then about a week later, he went on the talk show circuit. He then started saying, well, you're not going to these movies to watch, for example, Chris Evans or Chris Hemsworth or Chris Pratt or Chris Pine, or how many Chris's can I do here? So many Chris's. And he said, no, you're going there to see Thor or Captain America. Or he's saying that the characters are the star, and therefore the stars of these Marvel, what I think Scorsese called it, the roller coaster. A lot of them have tried to decry these as not being real movies, are not movie stars. That was the basic brunt of what he said. I think that's fair to say, right? And Simu Liu essentially came back actually really polite and respectful in his response. He was like, I love Tarantino. I love his movies. The guy's undeniably got a lot of talent. But without this diverse casting that Marvel's doing now, because that was part of, I think, what Tarantino was sort of decrying, was that they were throwing anyone and everyone in movies.
It was a major point of his rant on there. He's like, he said this. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said it's a lack of diversity and representation in movies. Right now, the movie sphere is being crowded by nothing but Marvel movies. It's the Marvelisation of movies right now in this age of movie making. So he said that the problem is there's not a diverse array of movies to be presented. Like most of them are just superhero movies. There's no diverse in subject topics and titles of movies. That was like Tarantino's argument.
Look at you doing a much better version of doing a much better job of giving a potted version of this than me. Look at that.
Hey,
who's the pop culture expert now?
Hey, I'm getting better at this.
You really are. Yeah, and that's exactly what he said. And Simu Liu came back saying, you want to talk about diversity? There's no way in hell before these Marvel movies were being made that an Asian American like me would have been given a $4 billion movie.
I got the tweet right here. He said, if the only gatekeepers to movie stardom came from Tarantino and Scorsese, I would never have had the opportunity to lead a 400 million plus movie. I am in awe of their filmmaking genius. There are transcendent auteurs, but they don't get the point. That knows this at me or anyone. For me, this is a perfect case of two things being right and nobody being wrong. I think nobody would make the argument that these Marvel movies are cinematic masterpieces.
We actually had a little chat about this on the day, didn't we? We had a little back and forth about this, and we both just immediately said to each other, I think almost at the exact same time, we texted each other saying like, they're both right though.
Yeah, they're both right. They both made points. They're both right.
Two of them are right. One of them sounded like an asshole saying it.
That's all it was, man. Like Tarantino does not have the right to stick his nose up at the diversity and talk about diversity. Well, the problem is no diversity. Really, Tarantino? Really? As a director where no women have representation and it's just a good old boys club with nothing but white directors, you're going to talk about diversity in movies?
And as a writer that decided that as a white American writer that he knew the black voice better than black people, like, let's also, I mean, the guy believes that he has a solid grasp on every voice in the world, every gender, every race. He believes he's got a solid grasp, but I think he's a fantastic filmmaker. I'm not going to take that away from him.
He is.
But totally. I don't think that he has quite the level of grasp that he believes he has.
He does not. And Spike Lee shot at him about that, man. This was like in the early 2000s.
Well, that was when he was like, I'm a white guy that's allowed to say the N-word, right? Spike Lee didn't really enjoy that.
And nor did the black community, right? He realized that was a losing proposition he got out of that, but I still remember that. as a guy growing up. I'm like, wait, you think you should be allowed to say this because you casting black people? Which speaks to the lack of diversity, dude. Like, okay, a lot of the pushback online was like, well, how dare Simi say this? Because if he watched Tarantino movie, he would see an array of diversity in there. He gave Samuel L. Jackson his star. Look at all these black guys. Denzel Washington was in his movies. He's always been welcoming. He got a multi. Look at Kill Bill. And I'm like, guys, you're kind of making Lou's point. You're thinking diversity as look at these people. Like, black folks has always been in movies, but how were they portrayed? Like, you can go back to Gone to Win. Like, look how the black people portray as the help or doing something stupid and dumb. Diversity doesn't just mean like different races, but a diversity in character representation and what these characters are doing. Like, I've always told people, even as an actor, I'm okay with black thugs and gangsters being on screen. I just want to balance it out with black doctors, scientists, and lawyers. Because guess what? We have black doctors, scientists, and lawyers. And when it comes to Tarantino movies and Scorsese movies, how many black doctors, scientists, and lawyers or main leads did you see? So it's kind of funny for Tarantino, but if the problem is diversity, you don't say.
I mean, I'll give Tarantino, I suppose, one slight get out for that is that at least in most of his movies, and this is something you've mentioned before yourself, that most of his movies, most of the characters are kind of lowbrow and terrible. It doesn't really matter where they're coming from. There are very few highbrow or good or decent characters in his movies.
He's a master of violence, right? He is the master of stylized violence. You go to a Tarantino movie for that. You go for the violence. However, that was from what? He'll tell you where it's from. It's from the black exploitation films. That's how he got his own style from.
I was just about to say, he's the master of snappy dialogue is what he is. He lifts a lot of his violence, his style, and a lot of the shots that he takes. The famous shots that I grew up seeing on posters in university rooms, like, you know, what you'd call college dorm room posters, you know, like all those shots, those poses, the shots, the setup, all of it were taken either from Hong Kong cinema, blaxploitation, lifted straight, shot for shot. Like he would just recreate the exact shot with different actors. The context would be different very often, but he would recreate the shots. He'd even lift some of the context, mix and match, and then add in that really snappy Tarantino dialogue. And his dialogue is snappy, and he knows how to get the best out of good actors that he picks.
Yes and no for me, man. And I hate to say this, I hate to be this guy, man. It's okay. I've noticed this thing, and I hate to make this the black and the black segment, but I've noticed this thing as a black guy growing up in America, and it could be different in England, but like the trendsetters in America have always been black people. It's this joke that we have that once a white man comes out as gay, he becomes a black woman. Dialogue wise, like yes, child, yes, queen. That dialogue is something you always hear from black people, right? But when they come out, they instantly find their inner black woman, right? And it's the same thing with like cultural terms and words. Like I grew up saying certain things, but when black people said it was looked at as uncouth and stupid, and then it gets into the mainstream, and then white folks copy it, and now it's just instantly cool. And that's the thing with Tarantino. A lot of his stuff is just lifted off of like black culture.
I guess that's where it's almost a comedy trope. I know I've seen it in several things. I'm not sure if you've heard it in American comedies too. Maybe I've heard it in those, but there's a line that you quite often get, usually from a middle-aged white man, I am a strong black woman. Now that you're saying like the kind of coming out and the chasing the trends and it's like, oh shit, this is so like, you're absolutely right. That is the point of chasing the trend. Once a middle-aged white man is like, I am now cutting edge, the go-to is, I am now a strong black woman. That's
the thing though. Like I saw that with Tarantino. Like these are things that were done, but when black folks did it, it was like, oh my God. They called it blaxploitation. Like it was all garbage. But then when Tarantino repackaged it, and some of the same lines, the snappy dialogue that was in those movies that was called like, oh, that's so lowbrow. When he did it, oh my God, this is so new and innovative. And it's not just that. I've seen it with so many things. I saw it with hip hop. I saw it with fashion trends. I saw it with dreads. I saw it with braids. Like I remember when the term bling came out, which was started by Lil Wayne in Louisiana. People's like, I'm not calling Jerry bling. And then it got added to the Webster Dictionary because white folks got onto it. And that's the problem I have with this guy now that's crying, we need more diversity. You don't say.
I think it's also funny that as a guy who was on the forefront of kind of indie filmmaking himself not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, who was constantly under fire from the media for doing things that were not, like, now he's become part of the establishment that's now doing the pushback about what the current thing is. Just feels a little bit like, Father Time grinds us all down. At the end, we're all going to be our dads, aren't we?
It's so funny, right? Because even our generation, we raised against the machine, and now we became the machine. Like, we are the machine now.
I remember the big thing they said when I was just starting work in my 20s, that all of these button-down managers that we had, the reason they were always so buttoned down, they always had the long sleeve shirts on, they always had the shirt buttoned right up to the top collar, and it's like, yeah, dude, because they're trying to hide all their punk tattoos from the 80s.
Yes. Bad decisions.
Well, you call it bad decisions, but it's just normal teenage rebellion becoming the machine.
Exactly. I mean, like, from society's standpoint, right? Because you have to kind of bow down to whoever's above you, right?
Yeah.
Once again, you Generation Z guys, you're welcome because we over you. Like, we're getting out of the baby boomer generation. Most of them are dying off and COVID didn't take them. I'm sorry to be so morbid, but it's true. Like, that was the boomer apocalypse. It got a lot of these baby boomers the hell out of here. Now you got the Xers, and the millennials are now taking over. So all this freedom that the Z has, like, your get down, it comes from us millennials. You're welcome.
But on the other hand, it's not like we escaped the machine either, because we were talking about this at the start of the podcast. We were talking about owning Disney stock, right? Me and you are both anti-capitalists who play the stock market.
Here's the thing. I tell everybody, I am a capitalist to my heart and my core. I'm about this capitalism life because I believe that capitalism is the only form of government that takes into account the greed mechanism. And as humans, we're going to be flawed. I'm not so married to capitalism so I can't hear the critiques of capitalism. And I think capitalism needs to be regulated strongly. Like, you got to have regulations at every turn.
I would actually say you're wrong to say that you're a capitalist then. Then you are a pure mixed economy advocate.
Okay. I'll take that. Okay. All right. That's fair.
Going back to, I studied economics a little bit in my younger days, and, you know, your economy is you basically have capitalist at one end, communist at the other, and anything along that scale is mixed. And I've always been very close to center mixed, but I do believe that capitalism has its place, as you say, with regulation, with proper social care, like healthcare, universal healthcare, I think, yeah, things like that. So with proper social care systems set up, capitalism has its place to actually take into account human nature.
Yeah, you got to have social safety nets. Like, you got to have a police department, a fire department, and you got to have healthcare. It has to be a right. It can't be a privilege. It has to be a right. You got to have that. Like, once again, the only industrialized country that doesn't have that is the United States of America, which goes back to racism. But I'm just saying, like, you got to have those things. Like, so as a capitalist, I'm going to be the first to tell you, like, if you ain't got those, man, you're going to have to work in society. But getting back to what we were talking about with Simi and Quentin Tarantino, it's like both of those guys had interesting points. Yes. And I'm with Tarantino when he says, like, these movies are, because going back to the woke loaded word, like, most of the time we're talking about story. The stories have become homogenistic and the same thing. You know what's going to happen before it happens. And like I said many times, I feel like these Marvel movies have jumped the shark because they have.
We've both talked about She-Hulk recently and how that, even in its last episode, even calls itself out for how homogenous these stories are becoming. And that falls into this trap that I was just complaining about Scream on my own podcast last week, the new Scream movie, that is, not Scream from the 90s, Scream 2022, about how just because you are calling out movies for doing the thing and then doing it, that doesn't make it clever satire. That you're still doing the thing. Even if you're calling it out and then still doing the thing, you're still doing the thing. It doesn't let you off the hook. But equally true, you're not getting directors of different gender and racial identities, writers of different gender and racial identities, actors, people both in front and behind the camera producing things without this Disneyfication.
Exactly. Like it has to be a baseline. And what Disney is doing is going to allow other mediums to take chances on other diverse writers and actors. Because my thing with Tarantino, going back to him, I'm like, bro, you're talking about a lack of diversity. You know you could be the catalyst for this, right? Like that could be you. Like you have gotten enough cachet in Hollywood to the point you could be the change you want to see. And that's my whole thing with a lot of these guys. I'm like, wait.
The man built his fortune off blaxploitation and Hong Kong cinema. He could very easily, I mean, maybe he has. I haven't looked into it too deeply, but the man could very easily produce a whole new wave of black cinema for the mainstream. I don't mean black cinema, because black cinema exists.
It does.
We both know that. It already exists. The black community, especially in America, I'm not sure if it's Hollywood where they produce their stuff, but there is certainly black cinema, and it has its own stars, it has its own movies, its own writers, its own. Some of them break out into the mainstream. Some of them we're familiar with by name, like Medea. We're familiar. Well, so we're familiar with. Before Tyler Perry became more famous, we were sort of familiar by the name, but really more just as a kind of joke than you'd hear it mentioned. Like, I've never seen a single one of those movies, but
I'm black. I've seen a lot of them.
I was gonna say, I have black friends in England who would watch the shit out of all of those movies and had seen all of them, and I'd never seen a single one. A lot of comedians, there's a whole like. Until I started hanging out with black people in London, there were all these comedians, actors. There's this whole other media under the mainstream that I'd never had any idea existed. It was like, oh, wait, there's this whole thing. Quentin Tarantino could have given that a push. He could have used his money if he really cared about where his influences came from. He could have given that a bump up to the mainstream.
But he couldn't. Know why? Because he was profiting off of it. And that goes back to my original point. Like Tarantino profited off all of that, so he can't like bring those guys out there because that's going to take the shine away from him. Once again, look, I'm not saying Tarantino is not talented. I'm not saying that he didn't like push his own narrative and write some great movies, because he did. He is great.
But Tarantino has always said he's going to make 10 movies and be done. I understand what you're saying, that he didn't want to take the shine off him, but he's got one more movie apparently, and then he said he's never going to make another one after that. And so why not do it now? Why is he bitching about Disney doing it instead of doing it himself now? He's got nothing to lose at this point.
Exactly. You've done it. And that's my whole point with that whole argument. However, Tarantino's point is still valid that these movies and the stories are bunk. But I mean, the argument about you're going to see Captain America, not the star, that's kind of a weak argument. That's kind of weak sauce to me.
I mean, Batman, James Bond, like any number of like Flash Gordon. Basically, at this point, because of the amount of remakes of Hollywood, I think you can name pretty much any pop culture character and point to that character having been played by several actors.
Well, even Star Wars, right? Like the actors didn't make that movie. The characters made that movie.
I would disagree, but
Harrison Ford was a nobody, dude. Harrison Ford was a nobody for that.
He didn't sell the movie, but he made the movie. I don't think.
Okay, that's my point. It's like, but the character he played made the movie. Mark Hamill wasn't really just a star then, but Luke Skywalker made Mark Hamill. Like, he walked around, he'll forever be Luke Skywalker. It'll never be a time where they'd be like, well, Mark Hamill, the voice of the Joker. No, it's, Luke Skywalker.
I'm one of those people because I'm just such a
massive
arsehole.
Me too.
I'm one of those people that's always like, oh my God, it's the voice of the Joker. Before I'm like, it's.
I was so tripped out when I found out that was Mark Hamill. Like, what? The Star Wars guy? But that's my point, right? It's always been times where characters have outshined the actors, and the actors become that character because of what they do. So that's kind of the point. What Tarantino said, I'm like, dude, that's always kind of been the point. But, these actors had to do it so well. Anthony Mackie had to do a good job as Falcon for you to believe as Falcon. Had to. And plus, Chadwick Boseman, let's be honest, he was a star way before the Marvel shit. Like, he played every black guy. Name it. You name it. Chadwick Boseman's played him. James Brown, Jackie Robinson, Thurgood Marshall. Why not the Prince of Wakanda?
I mean, yeah, very true. Jackie Robinson, that was a movie that I had no interest in because I don't care for baseball, and I watched it on a plane one time, and then I was like, no, man, I'm wrong. This is
good movie, right?
This is gold. Yeah, it was such a good movie.
That's the thing Tarantino was trying to say, I think. He was trying to say that the interest is not there for a diverse array of films. Like, people want this, and people are going for the money. Like, Disney is definitely going for the money, so they're pumping these superhero movies down your throat because that's where the money is at. And once again, Bob Iger, like, if that's what's going to bring the money in, hey, give them all the Marvel characters. What other obscure Marvel character can we create? Werewolf by Night? Do it. What? Bloodstones? You got it. Inhumans? Bring that shit on in here. That's the point that I think Tarantino was trying to make, but he made it poorly.
Yes, yeah, he made it in a way that made him seem like a gatekeeper rather than a person that was interested in preserving the integrity of cinema.
Because that's an honest discussion. Like, how do we get a diverse array of things in?
I've just given myself a question. How do you preserve? I mean, this is kind of a really amorphous term anyway, but how do you preserve the integrity of cinema without gatekeeping? Because we shouldn't gatekeep for sure. So maybe we don't need to preserve the integrity of cinema. Maybe we should just let it all in and just let the cream float to the top.
Okay, here's the thing. And I've actually thought about this, and I'm glad you asked that question. Because I saw the renaissance of hip-hop music, the new renaissance, and I call that around the 96 to 99. What happened was, right, you had a bunch of gatekeepers. Like, in order to make a song, you had to go to the studio, you had to pay like $50 to $100 an hour. After that, you had to pay like $50 an hour to get it mixed. After that, you had to pay like upward to $500 to get it mastered. I did that process, right, to get my first album out. But what happened around 1997, 98, around that area, technology caught up. So I was able to buy a computer. I remember buying my first computer and getting Cakewalk. That changed the game for a lot of us. And you're seeing the same thing with movies right now. This is the new renaissance for movies because technology has made it so cheap. Like, you can damn near shoot a quality 4K movie on your iPhone. That was unthinkable like 30 years ago. Hell, 15 years ago, you couldn't even think about that, right? But technology has gotten so damn good now that, look, man, I can get me a Sony A7 for like $3,000 and shoot me a quality 4K movie, then take it to Adobe Premiere with some above average editing skills, get a quality product out and push it.
You're absolutely right.
That's what's happening now. So that is why you're going to see like more diverse things coming out. It's the YouTubeification of entertainment.
I mean, you're absolutely right. The equipment we have available to us now at a consumer level price, I would say, not like a professional level price, even just a standard consumer level price, is more capable of giving us, I would say, probably better effects than you would have seen certainly in the Star Wars prequel trilogy.
Bruh, After Effects now is way better than anything you're going to see in that. I can make a lightsaber in After Effects right now. Like, I can make a lightsaber.
You are very right. We've reached a point where I've watched fan films in the last couple of years that, in terms of writing, casting, directing, acting, they've been gripping. They've been better than things that I've been watching on streaming services.
David Frank, before he died, was actually trying to self-fund that new Power Rangers movie, right? And I saw a clip of the new Power Rangers movie. Rest in peace, Green Ranger. Always my favorite Ranger. But when I saw his movie, it was actually pretty damn good. And that was self-funded. Right. I'm like, yo, the amount of stories that are coming out now is a function of being able to do something on a minimal budget. Like, just to give a little inside pool, like, you guys know that I'm writing a movie and I'm getting to the point that I'm trying to pitch it, man. And budget is a thing. For a lot of, I would say, indie films, the budget is like anywhere between $1 million to $3 million for a good movie. But a lot of these movies that you see are being done, like the indie films, are being done with $10,000.
If you've got some high-end consumer products and technology-wise, I mean, like your computers, like high-end, and you can afford a few of the programs to do the effects and the editing, and you've got a few talented friends, you can get so much done these days with so little effort. Well, not effort. I'm sorry, I said effort. I mean money.
Money.
It takes the effort. You need the talent and the effort, but with a bit of cooperation, a few friends, and a fairly low amount of money, you can get a hell of a lot done.
But contrast this to Tarantino's time, right? For him, man, you had to go to film school. Then you had to know somebody. Then you had to get your script. And then they had to put that into coverage multiple times and spec it out. And you had to know somebody. That was...
I was going to say networking.
Yes, that's the area he came. So I get what he's saying. Like,
yeah. I mean, when you put in so much work on something and you work so hard, and as a dance teacher, I also feel this a little bit. So I've trained with some of the best dancers in the world. I'm actually, I'm qualified as a dance teacher. I'm qualified by last time I met her, she was like 23 times world champion.
That's pretty damn good.
Right. These are like top level people. And I've trained and I worked and I spent so much money working with them. And then I see these people who just like, they watch a few hours of YouTube, go to a club, start teaching lessons, and they're making as much money as me and getting as many students as me. And I don't even necessarily rate them as good dancers, let alone good teachers. And I look at them and then it's like, I feel you, Quentin Tarantino. I feel you.
I get it.
You put that fucking money and effort in and all the networking and all the years, and now some dude with an iPhone's just putting stuff on YouTube and getting as many people watching as you. Like, I feel
sucks.
you, man.
Musician, man. I'm out here doing masterful compositions, out here trying to use live instruments, playing complex chord progressions, and next thing I know, I hear some boom, 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 boom. I'm like, really? That's what y'all? That all this hard work I'm giving y'all, all this music theory I'm learning, and this is what y'all gravitate to? I get it, Tarantino. I get it.
Right. But it still doesn't make you right.
It doesn't make you right. And once again, the Renaissance is coming because of technology, dude. I saw with music. Like, people made that argument about rap music. Rap music has gotten terrible. Why has it gotten so terrible? I'm like, no, there's always been terrible rappers out here. It just costs a lot to get your product out there. Now, like, with minimum work, well, I ain't gonna say minimum work. Once again, but minimum money, you can get a project. I can do a whole damn song in one day and put it out on Spotify within 3 days.
It's a tough thing because there is so much, because now everybody has a voice. This was always going to be the difficult part of this part of pop culture, is now that everybody has a voice.
Yes. Everybody has a platform.
It's hard to curate because it's really hard to find the best of the kind of content that you enjoy, because there's just so much. Everyone's got a voice. There's so much to dig through. But also, should we curate it? Should we even try to curate it? Because if we do, then we're blocking people out again just for no reason.
Oh, we don't, but we're going to have to. That's my whole point. We're going to have to do this. And this is the essence of being human, I feel like. We did it with cryptocurrency, right? Like, you have a whole blockchain platform that's supposed to be free flowing and anybody can do it. But what do? Oh, I need to go to an exchange. Why? Because it's more convenient, right? Like,
okay, that's very true.
We always do this in any set. Like, we need to curate things because it's too much. We're vying for too much airtime right now. Like, it's so hard to get that. So you gotta kind of trust somebody's recommendation of, like, man, what should I be listening to?
This is exactly what I was just about to say, is I think through the vast majority of what I consume, the media I consume, the podcasts I listen to now, are things that I find through people whose work I already enjoy, recommendations from either friends who I know have tastes that I either share or respect, or kind of other celebrities, podcasters, or movie makers, or if they say like, oh, I recommend this movie and I enjoy their stuff or respect their opinion, that'll give me a push in that direction. But it's hard to have the level of curation that we used to have, as you rightly said, in Tarantino's time when he was coming up.
But, that leads to the thing, like, people ask me, like, just to pat myself on the back, I got 1 million streams on Spotify this year. And people ask me, like, how did you get 1 million streams? And I keep telling them it's because I had to vow for that. I didn't buy streams. I don't do that shit, right? So I had to, like, cultivate a community. How did I do it? By being visible, going on every platform, starting a podcast, and cultivating the community. I don't call people, look, to call the people who rock with me fans is denigrating in my eyes. I just say people who rock with me. Because these folks have literally picked me up on their back. Because it's hard. You would think it's easy because most of these streaming platforms are free and they pay me pennies on the dollars. But getting somebody to listen to that is hard.
Understanding the current landscape of PR is the key these days. And I certainly don't, but I do respect that as a necessary talent in the world these days.
Eventually, we're going to have gatekeepers in TikTok. We already got it in YouTube. Like
Yes.
YouTube, it's over for YouTube. Like for the independent artists, oh, you're done in this town, buddy.
Facebook and YouTube is for our generation. There's already stuff that's superseded that long ago. TikTok's even on its way to being, for the old folks.
Something new is going to pop up. I know a few like platforms that are popping up now. And like I said, Tarantino, you came off sounding like an old man barking at the moon. Like you basically came off you kids need to get off my goddamn yard.
It's funny mentioning seeing the new platforms because especially as well with Elon Musk taking over Twitter, which I know we're not going to get into today because that's another like half hour at least of discussion.
Okay.
But I'm seeing more and more people tagging their new platforms in or the platform that they're using. And I'm going to be very interested to see which one of these fights its way to the top and which is going to be probably the next multi-billion-dollar company.
But the problem is it's going to be like streaming. Like when you only had one show in town, Netflix, it was easy. That one show got everything. But now you got Disney, Paramount, and these other streaming platforms. It made it so it's not even profitable anymore. And that's what's going to happen with these social media platforms.
Well, you say that, but then on the other hand, each one seems to capture a generation. Like TikTok has a very specific age group that go to TikTok now, and Facebook has its own age group. And I think that's just the way that it's, TV had its own age group. Facebook and YouTube had its own age group. And I think it's working its way. I think the next one's going to be just as big, but it's not going to be for us. It's going to be for, for our kids.
True story. And Tarantino, think about that next time you say something.
Yeah. And Simu Liu, well done for being respectful while saying what you needed to say and both being right.